Hello and good time zone, everybody. Welcome to another round of Creator Talks here at Hoard of Tales. My name is Marcus, pronouns are he, him, and I am honored to have Anna with me tonight. Anna is a creator of an entire smorgasbord of TTRPG related topics, going from creating supplements and adventures over to sensitivity reading, and currently even involved in writing for Modifius Cohorts Cthulhu. Anna, happy to have you here and welcome.
Thank you. It's fun to be here.
Glad to have you here. Anna, before we dive into this grand assembly of things that you do, I think there's hardly anything that you don't do at this point. How about you tell us a little bit who is Anna, where do they come from, and how did they get into this beautiful world of tabletop RPGs?
Right. Well, I'm Anna or Riley. I don't really have a preference, so I always say whichever one you prefer. I use they them pronouns. I am turning 27 at the end of next month. I am Dutch, and yeah, like you said, I do a lot of different stuff. And tabletop. I've only been really doing tabletop stuff for like 3 years. Like I think 3 or 4 years ago. I'm really bad with time. I played my first ever game. And that was so cool to me. That was like, you know what, I want to do more of this. And then my group that I played with sort of fell apart because reasons. People moved away, COVID happened, and I've always been a writer. So at one point, I was like, "Hey, there's stuff to write in the TTRPG space, so why not try that?" And that's worked out quite well, better than I expected.
I think you can honestly say that worked out well, because anyone who takes a look at your portfolio over on your side and goes to the TTRPG section sees all of these kind of writing projects that you were involved in. And when I was reading up on your project, I was impressed by not just the amount of things that you've written for, but also the diversity of different things. There are projects in there for big games like D&D 5th edition, but you've also written for smaller projects like, for example, Solus, which is a daylight micro setting. There's a big variety in there. And you mentioned that you already, like, you're a writer, you like writing. Um, what would you say is the difference in writing for a TTRPG project and writing, say, for a comic or a short story?
um, I mean, I guess when you write short stories and comics, you're more like focused about like dialogue and like plots. And when you do like TTRPG stuff, it's usually like um a lot of things I've done is like create magic items, or I've written a location. So you write sort of like you write some lore, so but you don't really write a plot to say. I mean, if you write an adventure, but it's very different because it's a different kind of storytelling, and some things are just not storytelling at all. It's just providing people with things to enrich their game with. Like I said, just magic items or I did some D100 tables, some random tables, stuff like that. So it's very different, and I guess that's why I have so many different things, because I really like a lot of different stuff, and I feel like if I did the same thing over and over, I would get really bored.
You mentioned you wrote things like D100 tables, which are basically plot generators in a way, I can imagine.
Yeah, yeah. So I did one that was random encounters on the road, which is you just have to come up with 100 things, which was quite challenging. After a while, you're like, okay, I'm at 50, I have 50 more to go. But like you leave it be for like 2 days, and then in those 2 days you come up with new things again. And but yeah, you have to think about something that could be interesting enough to start a plot hook, or maybe not even at all, depending on how the players take it. Something could just be just like a one-off thing that could maybe make the adventure a little bit, have like a funny moment but not do anything with it. Or some things are meant to stay with the party for a long time.
Exactly. And as you mentioned, when you write for a TTRPG, you're not like writing a linear story, which you do when you write for fiction, for example. In a TTRPG, when you write an adventure, you do give a bit of a framework for the story, of course, but there's not a guarantee that people will use it as you've written
Yeah.
it. How does that influence your way of writing those things?
I don't think it influences it much in that sense because, for example, when I write comic scripts, I leave a lot of room for the artist to have their interpretation of the story. I'd say like I obviously write the dialogue and I write like a panel description, but a lot of it's just like I give a lot of freedom because I like because it's a collaboration and I feel like writing adventure as a collaboration. I provide GMs with a thing they can use and then they take it from there and then they put their own spin on it, and I don't really get attached to my vision necessarily. It's just more like this is what I'm giving you and I'm hoping you'll do something fun with it. And if I could, I would love to watch what everyone does with it, but obviously I can't do that.
Isn't it then like as if you're writing a comic panel description for whoever's running the adventure? Because as you mentioned yourself, like when you're writing for a comic, you write like what's happening in that panel, you give a description,
Yeah.
but you leave a lot of interpretation up to the artist. Isn't
Yeah.
in that scenario, if you write, for example, an adventure for a TTRPG, you give the panel description for the GM to run it, but it's to the group and the GM to fill in the details, and everyone's going to paint a different panel in there.
Yeah, it's exactly like that. It's just I like to sort of give them something to work with, and then from there they have to take it and make it their own. And I'm not really I'm not really uptight about that or anything. I know there's writers that really like, to be very, especially also in comics as well, that like to have their script be followed to a T, and I'm not really like that. I like seeing people spin on my work. And like I said, you can't do that. I can't see what GMs are doing, but I like to imagine like that they can maybe use it in certain ways. And I think I've also sometimes like include like, oh, you could, if this doesn't work, if your players do this, maybe try this, or maybe you could do something like this, and then give them sort of some inspiration to how to interpret that.
Indeed. One series of projects that you've written on were the Lineages of the Multiverse by Daylight Publications.
Yeah.
And I looked at the list, and that's also an assembly of very different lineages that you've written for, because there is Tieflings of the Multiverse, Drow of the Multiverse, Fairies of the Multiverse, and Dragonborn of the Multiverse. Very different lineage, classic ancestries that we all know from our D&D adventures. What are those? What can people expect from those lineage series if they're looking at one of these and thinking like, oh, Dragonborn of the Multiverse, I like Dragonborn, I want to see what's in there. What kind of new things or classic D&D lineages are in there?
So they're based on like different worlds. So they've got like, for example, Faerun, but also Ravingna, is that how you pronounce it? I don't know how to pronounce any of those names. Some of them are like typical fantasy names, but they're like based on different kind of worlds that are used within a lot of D&D settings. And then they're all a little bit different. So like some, I don't really remember the specific, but for Tieflings, there's, for example, one that it's kind of based in like a desert, so it's very much like kind of desert colors, and like has a story to do with that, and has skills, and it's more like a sub race, honestly. And there's one I think that has to do with water. It's been a while since I worked on that product, but it's very they were all based on different sort of world settings, which meant I didn't know all of them, so I had to read up on some of them. But that's also something I like. I like kind of. I think that's maybe also my copywriting background, where I like just like being given something I don't know yet, and having the challenge of having to write about that, and having to write about that with sort of convincing like the idea that I do know what that is. And I like learning about that. I like learning new things. So but yeah, it's very much we called it the lineages because like race, and obviously the term has been debated in D&D, and lineages felt more accurate for what it was actually.
Right. Yeah, that makes total sense. And we see this as a trend in many fantasy games that have used a term like race, move to different to a different designation that does not have these negative connotations in there. And I do also think that lineages of the multiverse sounds just really cool.
Yeah.
You can put multiverse into anything, and it sounds immediately way cooler.
Yeah.
So that's so awesome. So you got to write a whole different collection of different spins on existing ancestries or lineages,
Yeah.
different incarnations of the D&D multiverse for that.
Yeah.
Of all the products that you have written for all of these TTRPG things, is there one that stands out most for you? One that you had a great time writing for, that was just especially interesting writing for?
I think the first project I did was the Incredible Items project, which was magic items for 5e. That was the first ever project I did, and it was really nice because Alan Tucker ran that. And basically, what happened is artists and writers collaborated, but instead of writing first and then doing the art, we got the art first. So you wrote items based on the art. So there was like a whole folder of art pieces, and writers got to pick which ones they liked, and then write an item based on what they saw. And I thought that was a really cool approach. And I really love like looking at these images and figuring out like, hey, what kind of vibe does this give off? What inspiration do I get from this? And that was really cool to work on. It's a great way to like, as my first project, to like get into this world. And yeah, that was really awesome.
That's like the reverse comic book way. Like
yeah,
you have
kind
the
of
first, and then you do the writing.
Yeah, exactly. It was really cool, and I think it was for artists. It was really cool as well to see what writers did with their art.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was really awesome. And I also found I really like writing magic items. I love coming up with these things.
Is that also something that you like doing if you play or run in a D&D game yourself, to come up with new magic items?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I have the book, so I use that, but I have plans like I do run. I only recently started GMing for my friends, and I do like if the situation calls for it, I will absolutely come up with a new item.
It's one of those fun little ways to give a little bit of homebrew to your own world.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
this fun little bit of custom item to share with the players.
Yeah, exactly.
From the Incredible Items, you mentioned that you got the pictures first, and from there you wrote the item. Was there a specific picture / item that really stuck with you?
There was one which I ended up calling the Cage of Bones, which was literally just like a almost like a, I don't know what the shape is. So not diamond, but like a geometrical shape. I don't know which one it's called, but it was literally just bones, like held together with some thread. And I don't know why it looked really. It spoke to me. And I don't know why. I just looked at it. It was like I want that one, because you also have to be quick, because some people were claiming things. It was like, I want that one. I need to write that one. So yeah, that turned out to be the Cage of Bones, which is something that if you activate and you throw it, you can trap someone in a cage like of bones. So it's like really small, and you can yeet it at someone, and they have to make a save, but then if they fill it, they get in like a cage.
So you can have your own Pokeball with
exactly. Yeah, I mean, they can break out of it. They have to like bastard them safe, but like they can break out of it. It's basically like a Pokeball kind of vibe.
Oh, just imagine meeting some kind of traveler on the road who has like a collection of these, and they just keep this bunch of people in these tiny cage of bones there.
Oh, they stay big. So it's like something you can use in a fight. If you're just sick of an enemy, just throw it at them, and they're trapped in a cage and they can't go anywhere.
It's one way to deal with the opposition.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. Perfect. You slowly wrote for different supplements for different games, and time moves on. You write for more projects, you play more TTRPGs, and before you know it, you're actually involved in a project for a publisher like Modifius, which people might know from games like the official Star Trek tabletop RPG, from several 2D20 games, like, for example, the Conan game as well. And here I'm sitting having a nice conversation with someone who's writing for the upcoming Cohorts Cthulhu game. You're writing for an adventure collection. We can, due to contractual reasons, not discuss the actual contents of it, but I'm intrigued. How did you get to write for Modifius?
Right. So back when Twitter was still okay, I used to use TweetDeck to find writing gigs. So I had like little keywords for searches, and then every like maybe twice a week I would check them if there was something new. And I found one that was that mentioned like an article where Modifius announced that this game was coming. They didn't have many details, but they announced that this game was coming. And
Hmm.
someone mentioned at the bottom of the article, they mentioned that they were looking for adventure writers. I was like, oh, I have a look. And I just clicked the article. They had an email at the bottom saying, if you interested, email us. So I emailed them, and then I heard nothing for months, and I forgot about it. I forgot because I just emailed them, and then I didn't hear anything, so I forgot it existed. And then after a few months, I suddenly got an email saying like, hey, we're finally ready to like do pitches for these things. So we had like a meeting, and they explained everything. And basically what they wanted is to send short pitches first, and then if that was picked, you get to send an outline. If that outline was picked, you got a contract and you got to write the adventure. So I was like, okay, so I have to go through like multiple rounds to do this. And somehow they liked one of my pitches and liked the outline, and they were like, here, we want you to write this. And it was really strange because also, to be honest, I'd never written an adventure before at that point. I was kind of like, I'm very much a person who like I take every shot I get, even if I have never done it before. If I think I absolutely cannot do something, I will not do it. But if I think that
Hmm.
I stand a chance, if I think I can like act, if I can at least try and make something of it, I will try. And that's what I did. So when I sent the finished adventure and they told me, oh, this is great, just small minor edits and then you're done, I was like, oh, apparently I didn't make a mess of things, because I was really worried that they were gonna like be able to tell that I'd never written an adventure before, but they were really happy with it, so must have done something right.
So you wrote the adventure yourself, but you're writing for a game that you never played before yourself,
Yeah,
I imagine, because the game itself is also still being made. I think a few weeks ago there was the Kickstarter
yeah,
for
yeah,
Chorus Cthulhu,
yeah, they launched
and
it, yeah.
so you write an adventure for a game you don't know much about. How did that go?
So I do play Call of Cthulhu, which obviously
Hmm.
by Chaosium, not by Modifius. And for Modifius they use because they also have Acting Cthulhu, which they use the
Yeah,
2D20 system. So it's also a new
exactly.
system. So it helped that I know some Cthulhu stuff, and I know like the whole Cthulhu vibe. But I didn't know the system, so I had to. Fortunately they had a lot of documents, so like they had like a lot of research documents that I had to read through, and like I watched some like actual players playing their games with that system and trying to figure out like how does the system work. So a lot of homework went into it, and then for the actual content, they just had like a whole world Bible, and and like they said like if you don't have your questions, just email us, because they were still obviously like they were working on a core book as well.
Right.
So things could change sometimes. But yeah, it's just a lot of homework, a lot of reading up, and hoping that you don't make a mess of things, and sometimes emailing them with questions if you're like, I'm not sure, how this works. Or they were all very kind and very helpful. So
That's good to hear, because that was about to be my next question. I can imagine that there is also a bit of back and forth between you and the publishers of this
hmm
game. So just so you can make sure that whatever you're writing is also in line with their expectations of the final
yeah,
product.
yeah. And so I had already asked like if they could send a previous from Acting Cthulhu, if they could send a an adventure, and they already included it in the document. But I asked like, oh, is there like anything else? Or and they provided me with that, which was great, because then you have sort of a baseline, because obviously like I never read an adventure before, but I know that like every publisher writes like in a different style. Like their
Right.
Avengers all look a bit different. So I was like, do you have an example of like what you've written? And they had that. So I kind of worked off that, try to keep that sort of structure in my adventure as well.
Did you have any, are you, or were you, or are you in touch with any of the other writers for this adventure collection?
Only at the beginning when we had the meeting. I actually don't know which one of them made it through. We didn't really exchange like emails or contacts. If I'm honest, it was all kind of in the beginning stages. I wasn't really sure what to expect. So I actually don't know any of the others right now. I probably if I get when I get the book, I can look it up and figure it out. But
can imagine that's exciting to also look forward to the fact that something that you've written is going to be a book in a book that's
Yeah,
going to get printed and that other people will hold in their hand and probably run at their table at some
yeah,
point.
that's wild.
The Coast Cthulhu is, for those who don't know, it's a Cthulhu setting in the times of the Roman Empire, if I'm not mistaken. So
Yes.
we take a lot of, at this point, um, classic tropes of eldritch cosmic horror fiction and put them to the distant past. Um, was there something about that setting, this combination of ancient history and the Cthulhu mythos, that really sparked your imagination?
I don't know if it sparked my imagination, but I really like challenging myself, and I like writing things that I haven't written before. So like if you were to ask me, if you had asked me like, what kind of stuff did you want to write, I would have never mentioned the Roman Empire. It would have never, not that I don't want to, but more that it wouldn't have come to mind. So when I read that original article saying like we're looking for writers, like, oh, that's interesting. And especially because I think what did interest me is that obviously, I'm from the Netherlands, and Netherlands has been part of the Roman Empire. It's something that I was way back taught in school about. So it's like, it is something that, like, if, for example, if it had been about like American history, for example, I wouldn't have been interested because that's nothing to do with me. And I was especially interested in just trying to figure out if I could in any way, put some Dutch stuff in there. I can say for certain that I did because contracts, but I can't confirm or deny. But yeah, so I was very interested in just seeing if I could pull that off, and I
Mhm.
learned a lot. Obviously did a lot of research because I'm not like a history expert or anything, but I did a lot of research, and I learned a lot of things, and I actually had a really fun time with that because I do like history if it's on my own terms. I feel like I have a lot of things in school because you have to do it. I didn't enjoy it
Mhm.
much, but when I can do things on my own terms, I enjoy it more. So yeah, there wasn't really something that sparked my like inspiration, but it was more of like a curiosity, I guess, was more the word, and then sort of a challenge that I saw that I was willing to tackle.
Which is in line what you said earlier about how when you approach something new, that if you think that you can do it, you just give it a try.
Yeah,
It's that kind of approach where like, I don't know much about it at this point, but I think I can do it, so I can give it a
yeah.
try.
Yeah, it's like I this Pippi Longstocking quote that goes something like, "I've never done it before, therefore I think I can do it." It's something that like I watched that as a kid a lot, and it's something that sort of stuck with me, and it's kind of my life motto now. It's also why I've done so many different things because I'm like if I'm absolutely certain that something is way out of my league, I won't like I know my limits, But if I think
Right.
like I think I could pull this off, I will give it a try. And apparently people trust me with that.
Well, it does also pull off because
Yeah.
you're now writing on this project for Modifius, and there is going to be something. This is something that you haven't done before. You haven't written an adventure before. You didn't know much about the Roman Empire before, and written an adventure about the Romans meeting Cthulhu and the King in Yellow. I'm just saying something. I don't know if those two pop up in there, but you pulled that off, so that's
Yeah,
amazing.
that's when they said when I sent the draft over and they said like, "Oh, we just have a few minor edits and then you're done. This looks great." I was like, "Oh, okay, thank God." I was so concerned that they were just being like, "Oh, this is rubbish," but no, they liked it. And it's like, okay, so, and then now I'm like, okay, so I can do something like this, and I guess it's also kind of to prove myself something that I can do things like this because I have a heavy case of imposter syndrome.
Mm.
So I try and sort of fight that by just trying new things and then seeing if that sticks. And if it does work out, it sort of proves to me that I can do more than I think I'm capable of.
And it's great to see if something new that you try pays off. And
Yeah, that's great to see as well, and it's a great experience because I've only been writing TTRPG stuff for like a year and a half, maybe 2 years now. Very not very long. So yeah.
fantastic. I'm really curious to see once Coast Cthulhu and that adventure book is out,
Mhm.
what's in that adventure? Especially now interested since you mentioned that you like that a bit of interest for the Roman Empire comes us from the fact that the Netherlands have a bit of history with that. And as someone who went to school in the Netherlands myself, I can approve. It has been
Yeah.
mentioned several times that there are
Mhm.
Roman ruins here. We know. But really curious to see what that will entail once it's out.
Yeah, I'm curious to see it in print.
Exactly. You don't just write adventures and supplements for TTRPGs, you also do sensitivity reading for projects. And that just adds to the collection of things that you do within the hobby.
Mhm.
Sensitivity reading is something that has become more prominent and more important in recent years and has, in my opinion, benefited practically every book it's involved in. I wonder, Anna, what makes sensitivity reading for TTRPGs, but also in the broader sense for other kinds of media, what makes that important to you?
Um, it's I guess it's also in part it starts with representation. So, for example, I'm autistic, I'm non-binary, and I sort of grew up with not enough representation. And when there was representation, it was usually really bad. So it creates a lot of stereotypes that just impact a lot of like impact people very negatively. So, for example, whenever I tell people I am autistic, I get told like, "Oh, you don't look autistic," or you seem too social," stuff like that, because they have a certain image in their head about it. Um, and I think a lot of that starts with representation in media, in any kind of media. So sensitivity reading for me is important because it helps sort of weed out problematic stuff and stereotypes, just so things become more accurate. Some people have called it censoring, which I think is bullshit. It's just making sure that people like certain identities and like are represented correctly and are free of any prejudice. Because a lot of things like you can like research as much as you want about like an identity you're not a part of, but you will never know what it's like if you don't have that lived experience.
Mhm.
um so it's always important, and also like research you can read can be biased. So I know that, for example, a lot of autism research is really biased and is really like setting autistic people up as being the problem. I know that there was a recent study that basically said, "Oh, autistic people have a good morals, but they're too good. They should do bad things sometimes." So, like they always find a way to make us the bad guys, and this happens for a lot of other identities as well. So just research won't always get you everywhere. So you need someone with that lived experience to sort of weed out those extra problems that you might not have picked up on.
Exactly. From what you also mentioned, no matter how good the research, there is often also a sense of bias that you have that you might not even be aware of if you don't have the lived experience that
Mm.
you can bring to the table there.
Yeah, yeah. There is a it's like even if you have like, for example, a family member or a friend that has that lived experience, even if you see it up close, it's not the same as actually having that and experiencing that. And so it's important that you consult someone who does have that lived experience, who can spot those problems that you might not be aware of.
Right. You also, next to sensitivity reading, you also do sensitivity consulting.
Yeah.
Where's the difference between sensitivity reading and consulting?
I guess it's sometimes it's used interchangeably, and I think it differs per person. For me personally, reading is like you send me a document, I'll read over, I give comments, and I tell you how to improve. Consulting for me is more that I have meetings with people, and then for example, recently someone came to me who has like an actual play podcast, and they were like, "Hey, we're tackling characters who are aromantic. I'm on the aromantic spectrum myself." And they're like, we have these characters who have like a relationship, like a platonic relationship, but it's more than that. How do we portray that accurately so it doesn't become, something that just isn't uh, true to what aromanticism is? So we just had, because there wasn't really like, it's not a script. They have a podcast, but like it's kind of like an actual play, but they have sort of like
Right.
an outline of the thing, but didn't have a script. So they just had like a talk with me where they could ask as many questions as they wanted, and I will give answers. And I think this person took like 4 pages of notes at the end. So I'm glad it was useful. But yeah, for me, consulting is just like having a meeting and like just having like an open conversation about it, and people just asking me their questions that they have. I guess consulting would be more at the start of a project. So if you start a project and you haven't written anything yet, you can be like, okay, what do I need to avoid? Some people prefer that, and other people, especially if it's got like a manuscript or like a written work, that will send it afterwards, so then I can check it.
It's interesting that you mentioned providing sensitivity consulting for even something like a podcast, it means that it has an added benefit for any kind of creative project in the end, especially when you're trying to show people that you don't have a lived experience with or not much experience with at all, that any kind of sensitivity reading or consulting in that case can be beneficial to the authenticity and the representation of said people.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I think everyone has some bias. For example, I am white. I do my best to be anti-racist, but there will still be things I probably do wrong because I grew up in a white environment, and there will still be things that I could never know about, for example, being black. And the same is if even if you try so hard to like be good and like be respectful and understand people, if you don't have the experience, there will always be things you just don't understand, or you will just never fully understand. So I guess for any project where you use, especially, and like if you have like a small bit, if you, for example, I've had people ask like, oh, I've got like an autistic side character that has like 2 lines in a script. I'm like, well, unless that character says something really strange about autism, don't sweat it. But if you've got like something that's like more prominent, so for example, with this podcast where this relationship is like a pretty prominent thing in their plot, or it's gonna be anyway, then it's important to make sure you do it right.
Indeed. And as mentioned earlier, this is something that we luckily see more and more in more creative endeavors, that these kind of sensitivity consultings and readings are applied more and more. And it does really benefit the final product and also of the representation of these people. Glad to talk about that. And I'm personally also very happy to see this happening, and glad to have you here talk about this as well, because I think this is also a side of the editing process of tabletop RPGs and other creative projects that often gets forgotten, that is something that is also important in the creation of these projects.
See, so we have a new guest. But yeah, no, it is something that gets forgotten a lot. It is it's usually an afterthought with a lot of people. For example, I had once, it's not TTRPG related, but I did have someone come to me once that they'd made a movie, they'd finished shooting the movie, and they're like, can you check this over for us? I'm like, and I actually found a lot of problems with it, and I was like, you should have come to me when you written the script, not when you like they finished the whole thing. They delivered me a finished product. I'm like, what am I supposed to do about this? I can give you comments, but what are you going to do about it? So I feel like a lot, it's same with TTRPG stuff. It's a lot of like, especially bigger companies now that are like, oh, sorry, we forgot. Or like they do it like sort of when they've got a finished product, they'll like to sort of tick a box, they'll like send people to look at it. But it's really something you should think about when you start a project. Like if you work out, what am I going to create? Like what kind of topics am I going to talk about that I may not be the most knowledgeable of? And then sort of either get people involved in the beginning or when you've like finished like a written work, because even if you do like a supplement, for example, even the artwork could have problems depending on what you're writing, especially if it's cultural. So like if you're, a lot of people I guess take inspiration from the real world, so you'll see like settings that maybe have like sort of an Indian like India kind of team, or like a Middle Eastern team, or a Latin America, and then you need to make sure that you're not actually like accidentally using harmful stereotypes in your attempt. Like, and people are like, oh, but it's fantasy. I'm like, yeah, but it's based on, a real thing. So yeah, it's definitely something that you should think about at the start. Like, if you make like a list of things that you need to do, you need to add that on there.
If anyone listens to this conversation who is creating any project in this regards, take these words to heart. Don't go asking for feedback once the product is done. Get that in on the ground floor and make it part of your process.
Yeah, unless of course, like if the finished product is like the overall, like if that's like you can show it when there's still room for change. If sometimes you need to have like a whole picture, so you need a finished product, but then don't have it be like, oh, this is the final product and we can't make any changes anymore, because then it's too late.
Yes, exactly. Keep those words in mind, people. So far, Anna, we have talked about already an entire collection of things that you do, a variety of things that you do, but we're not even done yet, because there's still something else that you've recently picked up, was probably also in your line of thinking of, I've never done it before, but probably I can do it. And that is joining actual plays, live stream tabletop RPGs. You've mentioned that only a few years ago you started playing tabletop RPGs. You found that you really enjoy them. And now you also find that you enjoy sharing that online in a space where everyone can watch you and your fellow players at a table playing a variety of games. Well, but what got you into giving that a try?
So as I mentioned, I started like playing TTRPGs like 3 years ago or something, and then I had a long break because I only played with people that I knew in person, and I was really scared to actually join online spaces because, like, I'm autistic, I'm non-binary, I'm it's like a very male-dominated space, especially, it's just I was very scared to join like an online group. Out of fear of maybe not being understood, or sometimes being made fun of. And it sounds really silly, but it is based on like actual experiences. So then I at one point did join an online group, and I found like I kind of fell in love with TTRPGs again, and I found I really enjoyed it, and it was a really nice group. Unfortunately, the campaign stopped at some point, but it did sort of open the way for me. Like, okay, there is online spaces out there where I can enjoy this. And then I started watching Critical Role. I know it was very cliche, but and it was something like where I was like, oh, so this is also a thing that people like a form of playing like TTRPGs. And after a while watching that and seeing that there's like, extremes, like not big names, but like, like localized groups doing that, I was like, oh, actually that's sounds really cool. And like I'm not camera shy, I'm not afraid to be seen. I sometimes I'll watch myself and be like, oh, I'm so awkward, or I shouldn't have said that, but like usually I get over that. I used to, when I was younger, have a YouTube channel and all that stuff. I still have one, it's inactive, but so I wasn't like afraid of being seen anyway. And I just really was like, I'd be interested in doing this a little bit more, or taking it to the next level, I guess. I don't know how to explain it. But yeah, once again, one of those things. I've never done it before. I think I can do it.
You mentioned, of course, that you got back into it or into that through Critical Role. I think if I were to hold a poll of how many people got in through that angle, I'm guessing like 70%.
Yeah, it's a very common story.
I think there's also, from getting into that through Critical Role, is not just that you see that TTRPGs can be a source of entertainment in the form of an actual play, but I think it also shows TTRPGs can be more than just the mechanical aspect of it. It is also that facet of improv theater that is fun to watch and also extremely fun to participate in.
Yeah, so I grew up in quite a small city, and as a kid I did really want to do acting classes. They had them for like a very short spell, and then the money ran out, and then like quit. And I don't consider myself a good actor at all, but I have always enjoyed kind of like playing different characters, especially in written. I've been doing like written role play for a very long time, since I was 15, and I really like sort of getting in the mind of other characters. It doesn't always I feel like it doesn't always come across as well as I want to. So I'm still learning, and I feel like that was also for me, like doing this improv kind of a way of challenging myself again, because I do like to challenge myself, of thinking like maybe I should try and put myself out there and maybe build some confidence and maybe doing things that feel a little awkward. And I feel like I am getting more comfortable doing that. I'm getting more comfortable playing different characters, and also, being less afraid of being a little silly, I guess, sometimes. But yeah, it is something that definitely I sort of saw as a challenge for myself, and that's how I build confidence.
And the thing is, like, being silly at someone's kitchen table with just the people at the table watching you, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But if you go into live streaming the game, there is other people that watch you. How do you experience the difference between just playing ye old classic way at the dinner table versus live streaming a game and having other people watch along with you?
I think I forget people are watching sometimes. So when I first started playing, I did one shots mainly, and in the beginning I was very like nervous and tried to smile all the time on camera, and I was very conscious I was being watched. And now it's like when I play games, especially the recurring games I'm in, it's just like after a while I just forget that we're live. I just completely
Mm.
forget that we're live. And some, I mean, for example, sometimes I'll look at Twitch and like, oh yeah, I'm in a Twitch chat and stuff like that, but it doesn't feel like people are watching, I guess. Or maybe if it does, it doesn't bother me, or it just feels very normal, and I'm more focused on enjoying the game than I guess entertaining.
Which sounds like a good state to be in, because at
Yeah.
the end of the day, you're doing this because you're enjoying it.
Yeah, I enjoy it a lot. I find another thing that I really enjoy, and is that, so I like when schedules work as have as planned. And I found it with TTRPGs, like actual plays, people are a lot more like punctual and look more serious about it, whereas with home games it's impossible to plan it. It's like, so that it, like, I've had games where we're supposed to play every other week and it's been like 2 months. So that's what I really enjoy, I guess, well, about actual plays, that just like everyone is dedicated. And obviously sometimes real life gets in the way, and that's fine, but everyone is at least trying to make it. And that's something I also really enjoy.
This is one of the super relatable things I have heard in the conversation so far. This is so 100% true. Once you start running actual plays and getting people together for these actual plays, you notice that in general, also in my experience, those are people who they stick to those schedules, and
Yeah.
there is much more consistency in there than with a home game, which is of course understandable because you do treat it differently in a way.
Yeah.
And they are two different ways of enjoying what can be the same game, but they exist in very different situations. But especially having a very consistent scheduling is one of the
Yeah,
big advantages of
it's really
actual plays.
nice. Yeah, it's really nice, and I really, especially like as an autistic person, I really like knowing what I'm like up against. That makes it like knowing what's gonna happen. So
Right.
if I got something blocked out in my schedule, I enjoy when that thing happens, and not like cancel last minute, which I've had. And then like obviously like with home games, it's always canceled last minute for a very valid reason. I'm never like I'm not like want to accuse anyone of having not having a valid reason, but it's like with actual plays, I feel like it's a little bit less, or at least people cancel like a lot earlier.
Right.
And I just really enjoy that sort of consistency, and like knowing, okay, every week I'm going to do this and this and this, or next week I'm going to do that one shot, and knowing that it's very likely that it's going to happen.
Exactly. The live streams and the actual plays you do, you play online with people. You're all over, well, I can say sometimes all over the world, at least all over Europe, depending on which constellations you play in.
Mhm.
Is there something that you miss in playing with people online that you do have when you play at the table with people?
Um, I don't know if there's something I miss. I guess maybe Sounds really silly. But like, so at home games, where I have a lot of people, usually what I was used to was to have like everyone bring their own snacks and like to
Mm,
share that and like having that, and maybe like afterwards like making dinner together. And I feel like I miss that a little bit, which sounds really silly, but it's just a little bit of I guess coming together like in an actual space rather than being online and everyone doing sort of their own thing. Um, but it's not something that's like a deal breaker. It's not like that I enjoy like the online games less because of that. It's just more that sort of with the feeling of I could say it in Dutch, but gezellig. I don't know how to translate. It's an untranslatable word. It's kind of cozy. It's fun.
yeah,
It's
the
it's
cozy
yeah,
vibe, the
the
cozy
cozy
vibe.
vibes.
Yeah,
I guess.
yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like that. But it's fun in online as well. But it's just a little. It's a different vibe, I guess.
I have myself very fond memories of playing at tables with people and just having lots of snacks and food on the table as
Yeah. Yeah.
well. And
Yeah.
also like hanging around after the game to have some pizza together or meet up earlier to have lunch together and stuff like that. That's certainly something that is very unique to the physical space. And that's
Hmm.
not something that you have online. But you also mentioned yourself, it doesn't make playing online any less fun but it's just something that you can't replicate
Yeah,
online.
exactly. And then like with games, like usually afterwards we'll sit and talk, but like after a while, like everyone has to get to their own lives, and it's not,
Exactly.
logging off is not the same as saying goodbye to everyone at the door, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. So far you've been playing in a few actual plays. Actually, you've been last Saturday. We've seen you in Roll for Good on
Yeah.
Kids on Brooms. Is there any kind of specific game or campaign idea that you would really like to put into an actual play or participate in an actual play?
Call of Cthulhu.
Call of
I,
Cthulhu?
I I I played played Call of Cthulhu for a while. In sort of a home game, or it's an online game, but like it's not like streamed, if that makes sense. And I've really grown to love that game as much as it stresses me out. I've really grown to love that game, and I would absolutely adore to be in actual play, even if it's just like a one shot or like a very short campaign. I would adore to
Right.
be in Call of Cthulhu campaign or actual play. That's I don't know what it is about that game. I guess I like the fact of just being like, what the fuck every time. I really like I always like when I'm stressed about a game, that's when I know I'm having fun.
I think that with the right players, that kind of tension that games like Call of Cthulhu create also works very well in an actual play format because
Hmm.
it if you can portray that tension also as players at the table, that's engaging for people to watch. And
Yeah.
Call of Cthulhu and similar games in that same vein, I'm also thinking about the Alien tabletop RPG with amazing mechanics to emulate that rising tension and that dread that increases. They make it a joy to also portray that for an audience.
Yeah.
So those games are perfect for an actual play.
Yeah, I think so as well. And I don't think I've seen one shots before. I don't think I've seen many actual play campaigns that do it. At least not in Europe, I think. So if anyone needs a player, my schedule is probably open at some point. Yeah.
Pay attention to that. Everyone's who's watching that. All right, Anna, we are slowly coming towards the end of our conversation, and I'm just still baffled by how many different topics we covered in one conversation. I'm really amazed with how many things you're involved in, how many things you try, and I really like your approach of, I never done this before. I'm probably good at it. That's something that I find really inspiring. So I'm really happy you've come here and talk about that. But before I let you go, I always like to ask one final question to whoever comes here to talk with me. And sometimes these questions are a little bit silly. I don't apologize for that. But I have one for you here. You have been doing some research about the Roman Empire for your Yoko's Cthulhu adventure. Now, I wonder, what is your favorite thing that you found in your research about the Roman Empire? What's the favorite thing, like even the most little thing that people maybe don't know? What was your favorite, funniest, or most interesting thing you found out during your research?
There is there was a tribe that actually lived on Dutch soils called the Batavians, and basically what I found out is that apparently they were able to cross rivers, but like not just that, but like on horses in gear, swimming all together and make it to the other side. And like apparently Romans were kind of like scared and baffled by that, but also impressed. They were like, okay. So you just imagine like there's like Romans here and like Batavians there, and they're like, oh, you can't cross the river, you can't get to us. And these people just get into the water on their horses, like holding formation as well, crossing this river, swimming and stuff like. And it's just, I just love that. I was reading, I was like, that's really cool. I really like that. It tracks for Dutch people with water.
If you look at the apologies, if you look at Dutch history, there's a lot of funky stuff they used water for in their tactics.
It's a lot of like, we rule the water, kind of like, you know, it's like
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, today I learned about the Batavians riding their horses through water, but I also learned a lot about the many projects that you work on, about why sensitivity reading is important, and how exciting and fun playing in actual plays can be. Anna, before I let you leave, why don't you tell us where people can find you, what you're up to, and where we can find you?
So I'm pretty much everywhere on the internet at Peculiar Planets. I play in actual plays on Wednesdays. I play with Dutch Dungeons, where we play D&D in Dutch. If you don't know Dutch, you can still join. Maybe catch the vibe. I don't know. And then on Saturdays, I play with the Misadventures League. We play Teens in Space currently. That is at 8 p.m. Central European time, which is the same for Dutch Dungeon as well. And Misadventures League is also where I do a lot of stuff behind the scenes. Also on Wednesday, they have a game called Housevale at 8:30 Central European time. Yes. Really cool horror game. Yeah, and then next week, of course, I'm going to be in the Hoard of Tales happy hour. So I'm really excited for that.
Exactly. Thank you for being here, Anna. As Anna already mentioned, you can watch them come back on our next EU Happy Hour next week, when we will also be back on this channel. If you want to keep track of whatever is going on with Hoard of Tales, make sure to follow us on our socials. Make sure to follow and subscribe to our channel here if you want to. And if you're tuning in later to this interview, you can find the VOD and everything up on our YouTube at youtube.com/Hoard of Tales. Anna, thank you very much. Thanks everyone for coming to hang out with us today. Everyone, take care, stay safe, and see you soon on Hoard of Tales.
Bye.
Bye.